So, and you know, it succeeded, it was financially successful, but that's because they started with a low base. Now they were starting with a fairly high base, substantial base, and they were expecting it to grow 5 or 10-fold. Moreover, it was not going to act as a replacement for other expenditures because of the comments I made earlier about horses. So most of the cost of transport systems was in the feed for horses. Okay. And horses were not going to be eliminated. They already knew that railway stimulated demand for horses. Okay. So therefore, this fairly slow-growing economy of the 1840s, of the early Victorian period, which was, in which taxation, annual taxation of 50 million pounds was regarded as a barely tolerable burden, extremely highly taxed during that period, they're now expecting to generate new economic activities of comparable amount. And they really should have realized that was absurd, but they didn't even think about they didn't stop to even think about it and discuss that issue. Okay? And there are some other points. I mean, those kind of fairly convincing arguments that all of the quantitative models that they had at their disposal, models they had used, if they only approached them with a slightly more skeptical mind and applied it in the right way, showed them very directly that they should not be making these investments. They're bound to lose. But they went forged ahead and did lose indeed in the end. There are multiple delusions in there. Well, some of them are delusions, some were just simply the world changing and they're not quite realizing the new future. So what were the kind of multiple delusions which led them astray? One is trusting engineers. During the mania of the 1830s, there are two elements. So they were approaching everything fairly rationally. They of course had cost estimates and they had revenue estimates, and then out of these they computed roughly what the profits were going to be. In the 1830s, so again they had cost estimates coming from the civil engineers, and they had traffic estimates or demand estimates coming from traffic takers. It turns out that the engineers blew it. Costs turned out to be almost uniformly twice as high as had been estimated. And this is, by the way, very common in history. Okay. You look at something like the Big Dig in Boston that was sold to the public, especially to federal taxpayers, as a, I think, $3 billion project. It turned out to be about a $15 billion project or so. Many, many examples of that. It's, trusting engineers is very risky. Okay. On the other hand, society may not be able to progress without trusting engineers too, such as another story in here. Anyway, so during the run-up to the railway mania of the 1840s, railway engineers were now saying, look, we've learned our trade. During the 1830s, everything was new. We didn't quite know everything, but now we have better technology, we have all the skills. Trust us. Cross our hearts, we're going to deliver on these costs. They didn't. Cost overruns were not as bad, they're not 100%, but about 50%. Okay? Other things, there were actually some widespread implicit collusion. Again, if you inquired carefully, you could detect that the cost estimates were nonsense, that they were going to be exceeded, and so on, but you had to kind of search for it. Something else which was, again, not an issue of maybe delusion, but a changing reality. So up until then, British society was growing very slowly. The general mindset, very deeply embedded mindset, was that the economy was static. Static but subject to oscillations, going up and down. If harvest was good, times would be good. If harvest was bad, then people would starve in that case. But generally speaking, there would not be any kind of significant progress, except for quantum jumps, when a new invention came in, such as a railroad or steam engine. Okay? They were not aware of steady incremental growth. That developed only in the 1850s and 1860s. Okay. So again, it's I don't know if you call it delusion, it's just simply a new worldview, a new way of looking at reality. Something else, locality of traffic, I referred to earlier already. They thought they were serving long-haul traffic, connections between distant terminal cities. Instead, the main demand for the passenger transport and also goods transport was for local transport, like local commutes, and a few other things. So, anyway, so I claim that yes, because of all these delusions, they sort of lost, and the loss was predictable. Markets were not efficient, just like they were not efficient in recent times, contrary to what most economists claim. Going into the future, many of the things that happened then that led people astray are still true. We still have many of these positive feedbacks occurring in the economy. And in some ways, I think predicting or recognizing future manias may become harder. One of the reasons is that now, actually, if you compare the internet bubble, telecom bubble to the railway mania, you already see it. In one case, the exaggerations of demand were much smaller than in the case of telecom bubble. Why? Well, because with railroads, you're still talking about fairly concrete things. You're still talking about transporting either people or sheep or coal or other kinds of goods, and people have some sense. If you tell somebody that a billion people are going to be taking a particular train, say from Rock Island to Chicago, they laugh. Okay? They know it's ludicrous. When you tell them that some petabytes of photonic traffic is going to be flowing back and forth, what does it mean to them? You have to persuade them to delve deeply into it to understand it. So we're kind of moving into a new world where things are less concrete. People can relate to them less easily, and so it's much easier to delude them. Okay? Just sell them a bill of goods. And again, it's modern information technologies. I mean, they are wonderful. They are opening up all sorts of opportunities. But on the other hand, they also make misinformation easier to spread, and they make creation of myths easier. And we can observe it today too. Okay? With kind of organization on the internet, groups evolving that have almost diametrically opposite views of essentially the same kind of objective reality in the case. And also we have a concept, namely hype makes reality. This was something which was quite commonly cited, say, in Silicon Valley during the internet bubble, and has some truth to it. And if you think about Steve Jobs and iPad and iPhone and other kinds of things, again, think of the publicity trying to kind of stimulate interest in there, trying to create the kind of all the excitement. That seems to be becoming more and more important as we're moving away from a society that's barely above subsistence level, where people worried about bread. Now we're concentrating and paying much more attention to circuses. And when I talk about circuses, then the clowns can really take over and can delude people. Okay, so I think that opens up new dangers for the future. So future, I think, again, I'm sure there will be many more technomanias as well as other kinds of manias. I think it's going to be very hard to predict directions in many cases. Also, I think we see some signs, that's a qualitative feeling, I've kind of quite demonstrated qualitatively, of growth in what I call credulous simplicity. People like Ben Bernanke, Alan Greenspan, or Larry Summers, who are in the top policy-making positions, claiming that no, you cannot detect bubbles. I think this claim is really sort of nonsense, which again is kind of conducive towards growth of future bubbles. Okay. So I have quite a bit of material on my homepage. If you would like to learn more about it. In particular, I have a fairly long manuscript, detailed manuscript called Collective Hallucinations and Inefficient Markets, which discusses the British railway mania, somewhat more detail, and can provide also some of the background to that period. And otherwise, thank you very much.